We'll get started as soon as Julie and David Young start. Okay, terrific. Well, everyone, welcome to the June 15th meeting of the NSRP work group. We really appreciate your time today. We're in the midst of a pandemic that you all very valued, so we really appreciate you taking part of your week to come and talk with us. Just a reminder, as in the past, to mind your mute. If you're not speaking at the moment, mute the microphone, simply because we can hear everything happening around you or on your computer. So it's just helpful to minimize distraction if you would mute your microphone if you're not right at the moment. We have an exciting call today. So today we are going to review a straw man for your consideration. So we have two. I'm sorry, what? Okay, so we have two main goals for today. The first is to get feedback on the straw man, and if it's possible to get consensus, that would be great. But really, we want to focus on getting feedback. This is the first time you're seeing something in writing for you to provide your responses to, so that is the main goal. And by no means is this a final product. It is just designed to get your feedback. That's the first goal. The second is to get consensus around other initiatives that would be possible to address the nursing shortage. So while one, we want to get feedback on the straw man. Two, yes?
We're getting some comments that there's a lot of feedback. So if you're listening both through your computer and your phone, please go to that little small speaker on your bottom right on your computer and mute your computer so that will eliminate the feedback.
Okay, we will monitor that as we continue in the hope that eventually we'll all be able to hear, but also not be heard unless it's our turn to talk. If you need help trying to figure out your sound situation, feel free to ask Victor. As far as I can tell on my end, there's not a lot of noise over here. My cat is being quiet right now, so hopefully it's not on my end. So if you all would go to your official agenda for the meeting and open up the minutes from the last time that we met, which was about a month ago, we need to.
Ginger, I think it might be you.
Yeah, I don't know what to tell you. There's not noise on my end, my house anyway.
Are you calling in? Are you dialed in?
Did you call in? Yeah.
No, I did not call in.
You should probably try that, because if you're hearing me more, if everyone's able to hear me more clearly, I did call in. Are folks, this is Julie, are folks able to hear me more clearly than you were able to hear Ginger?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, Ginger, yes. Why don't we take roll, if you don't mind? We could have David Young take roll, and perhaps you could use the call-in information. The number is right here. No, that's not the call-in information you need. Victor, if you could please send the call-in information to Ginger, we can have her call in while David Young takes roll. That sound like a good plan?
Yes. So I will go ahead and call roll. And if for some reason I call your name and I don't hear you, well, what I'll do is I'll say thank you after I hear your name. If you're a work group member and I don't hear you respond and I say thank you, then you can just indicate in chat that you are here and we'll count you as present. Gail Acuna. Nina Almazay.
Present.
Julie Arteaga.
Present.
Tracy Cooper.
Here.
Thank you. Marla Urban Roseman.
Present.
Thank you. Nancy Farrenwald. Janice Hooper.
Here.
Thank you. Steve Johnson. Deborah Jones.
Present.
Thank you. Linda Lane. Pamela Lauer. Beth Merwin.
Here.
Thank you. Jonas New. Brenda Nichols. Beverly Skloss. Catherine Tart. Poldy Church. Tetsuya Ume. Sally Williams. And I know Sally emailed us and said that she would try to join us at 2 p.m.
This is
Linda,
Nick. Can you hear me? Hello? This is Tetsuya.
Yes. All right.
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ume. I'll mark you as present.
Thank you.
All right. Linda Yoder.
Present.
Thank you. Cindy Zolneric.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Julie Eklund.
Here.
Thank you. Stacy Silverman. Ginger Gossman. I know she's here getting connected. Ed Buchanan. And Emily Cormier. Is there anyone who is a member of the work group who you think maybe I didn't catch that you were here?
This is Linda Lane. I'm here.
All right. Thank you, Linda. Appreciate it. Anyone else?
This is Steve Johnson. I'm here.
All right. Thank you, Steve. Appreciate it.
This is
Anyone
Pam
else?
Lauer. Here.
Okay. Great. Thank you, Pam. Anyone else?
Nina Almosi.
All right. Thank you very much, Nina. Anyone else? All right. I think that's the end of the roll call.
Thank you, David. Ginger, were you able to join us? It could be that she's still trying to get on through her phone. So I'm going to continue along with the agenda, which hopefully everyone can see. And also, David, Stacy Silverman is muted, but she is on the call. So I don't know if we've muted her somehow, but she is. She can't unmute herself. So I'll ask Victor to when he has the opportunity.
She's unmuted.
Okay, Stacy, can you hear? Can you
I'm
respond now?
here. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Great.
Great, and hopefully, again, Ginger will join us in a minute. I think we should probably move on to consideration and approval of the minutes from the May 14th, 2020 meeting. And so, do we have any questions or comments regarding the minutes from our last meeting? And they are, I'm scrolling through them. They were in the materials that we sent to everyone.
I just want to say well done from Jan.
Thank you, Jan, and I'll send that over to David Young, who takes our minutes. So thank you, David. Then do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
This is Marla Urban Rosen. So moved.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
This is Deborah Jones.
Okay, thank you, David. Did you catch the person with the second?
No,
Deborah Jones.
I'm sorry, would you say your name again?
Deborah Jones.
Okay, thank you.
Deborah Jones, and all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? If not, the motion passes and the minutes are adopted as written. Then I'm going to keep moving through these materials here. David, I might need you to help lead me as we wait for Ginger. But my understanding.
I made it in.
Oh, you did. Wonderful. Well, I'm going to hand it back to you, Ginger. You're coming through loud and clear for me now.
Okay, great, thanks. Glad we made through roll call and approved the minutes. So the next thing we're going to do is talk through two sections about improving the nursing shortage. And the first piece is a critical piece where we're going to be thinking about our straw man. But before we jump into that, we wanted to invite Janice Hooper to share her ideas about quality indicators.
Okay, well, let me find my thing. I just had a copy this morning of that final draft showing quality indicators. You know, I think these are all things that we're going to use when we're looking at programs to see where they are fulfilling all of our requirements. I'm not sure a lot of these are measurable enough for you to use as criteria for funding, but they might help you with qualitative information. So one of them is NCLEX, and that certainly is an outcome. And I know when we were putting all this together, we called all the accreditation organizations that accredit nursing and found that they all use the same measures in program outcomes, such as licensing results, graduations, retention, employment satisfaction, as well as jobs. So those are the big things, but I think we want to focus more on nursing criteria. So that's about all I have to say. Thank you.
Did anyone have any comments to add to Janice's thoughts? Okay, so we also sent out a report that I think went out this morning for your consideration. I think Cynthia Zolniak and Pam Lauer were going to speak to you about that.
I don't know if Pam, are you on?
Yes, I'm on the call.
Okay, you're probably better versed than I am, but I think this report is significant in terms of, I think if you cut to the chase, it's predicting an overabundance of nurse practitioners to the extent of 19,000 by 2032. And so I think that information, that data point is something we need to consider as we look at funding. Pam, do you want to speak to this report?
Yeah, just like Cindy said, when we're looking at nurse practitioners in particular, the projected shortage that we had reported back in 2016 has now turned in, before in 2016, we had projected that we would have a slight shortage, and that has now changed to a surplus nurse practitioners in Texas, and that's largely due to just the growth in supply in our state. The demand for these provider types hasn't really changed from our last set of projections. And this is consistent with what is happening across the nation. So a study being done separately by the vendor business projections for us found that growth for nurse practitioners across the U.S. is over there's a lot of noise in the background. I'm not so that's something important to consider. And as you can see in this Shortage, thousand RN FTEs projected by 2030. Another scope that is different from our previous projections is the shortage of LVNs is expected to be much higher and to happen much sooner than previous projections. So this report is still in a draft form, but we did want to share these projections with you. The numbers will not change. Important for this group to take these into consideration as you're working on this program. So, does anyone have any questions about the projections?
This is Marla Urban Roseman. I guess I have a comment. The problem is that you say it says NP, but that's just too general. I mean, what kind of NP? I probably would say it's probably the FNPs. That's what I'm hearing, is that there's an oversupply of the FNPs, but not necessarily the other ones, like a psych mental health nurse practitioner, for instance, because we have such a drastic shortage of psych mental health providers. So just wondering, is there any way that we can dive more into what this oversupply of NPs means?
Yes, right. And the projections break it down by and it is primarily driven by FNPs, the oversupply. The other numbers, I have to pull them up. We have those built into the dashboard, not into the high-level reports published. But that's made available once the report is. I don't have access to it right at this minute, but I can share the.
I'm going to jump in and ask that we may need to mute everyone because we're getting very loud background noise. Are we able to? Okay, I think that's better. Thank you.
Can you still hear me?
Yes. Are there other questions? Were you guys able to hear my response? I will provide numbers on the breakdown by NPs because you have to have that. It's just not in this high-level report.
Can you scroll up a little bit so we can see the graphs that compare? Yeah.
Sure.
So
tell me when to stop. Yeah, right here.
Yeah. So there, and if you go up farther, there's still a shortage of RNs. So in terms of how I just thought that may affect decisions about priorities of funding.
Yeah, that's helpful.
Pam, did you say this data is available? I'm looking on the.
It's not on our website yet because the report hasn't been published. So the dashboard will not be updated until the report is published.
Okay.
So that'll be sometime in about mid-July. I'm pulling up the numbers right now, so it'll take me a minute to open this sheet. Give me just. Okay.
Everyone received an email from BJ Bishop this morning around 9:30, and this report that we're showing is attached to that email.
Okay, so for the nurse practitioners, it does break it down a little bit. It breaks it down into 5 categories. So it'll be medical specialties, primary care specialties, home, women's health, psych, and then other. And the supply growth is driven by those in the primary care specialties, which is, primarily the FNPs. And then, like you said, it's psych, not like that demand is almost, there's still an oversupply being projected there, but that's not what's driving this. It is the primary care specialty.
Any other comments about these data?
Okay, so we are asking you to do a lot of background processing on this, and think about those while we preview to you the straw man. You've already been sent the information, but David Young is going to walk us through that more clearly for everyone to be on the same page as we're thinking about that. So just remember that, again, this is the first time you're seeing something concrete. We want to be really clear that this is a straw man for your feedback. It's just a place to start, but it is not the end point. So we do want to hear from you. So David, I will hand it over to you now.
And can you, this is Julie, I just want to make sure everyone can see the PowerPoint now on their screen.
Not yet.
Okay, because it says up there. All right, let me try again. I'm going to stop sharing and go in again and see if I can get this. Okay.
There you go.
Okay.
All right.
Great.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'll be presenting the straw man today, including forwarding through the PowerPoint that's on your screen. That includes the components of the straw man. Please jot down any comments you have, but save them for after the presentation. Ginger will lead us through a discussion of each of these slides once I've concluded. We divided the straw man into two parts. The first relates to revising the current program, and the second relates to other initiatives. My presentation relates to the straw man for the current program. At the last meeting, Dr. Eklund presented the survey results of the design ideas recommended by the subwork groups at the February meeting. So as you'll see on slide 2, many work group members indicated in either the survey or in comments in previous meetings that we should make the program easier to understand and administer, make funding more consistent and predictable, prioritize initial licensure nurses, and incorporate a measure of quality. So moving on to slide 3. The straw man the coordinating board, the coordinating board staff developed for your consideration is designed to achieve those objectives. The proposal is to have one program with multiple parts, which would make it easier to administer. We'll move on to slide 4. We would prioritize initial licensure by limiting funding for increases. Sorry about that. My screen just left me, but I got it back. By limiting funding for increases in RN to BSN to 20% of the total appropriation. We'll move to slide 5. We would incent increases in graduate nursing degrees earned in areas that lead to instructional credentials for graduates by weighting them at 2.0. All right, we'll move to slide 6. We would factor in quality by varying funding rates based on NCLEX pass rates. Institutions with a pass rate of 90% or higher would have a factor of 1.0. Institutions with a pass rate of 80% to 89.99% would have a factor of 0.9. And institutions with a pass rate below 80% would have a factor of 0.8. Institutions on probation would not be eligible to participate in NSRP, which is the current practice. So we'll move to slide 7. The maximum award per increase in the number of graduates would be $25,000 per graduate, except the maximum award per increase for graduate nursing degrees earned in areas that lead to instructional credentials would be $50,000. We'll move to slide 8. Funding would be based on actual increases in the number of nursing graduates. To make funding more consistent and predictable, we would use 3-year rolling averages. We would provide funding for both years of the biennium in the first year as soon as possible after institutions submit graduation data in October. We would eliminate advances, so nursing programs would not have to return money to the coordinating board unless they spend funds on non-qualifying expenditures or they don't spend the money within 4 fiscal years after the year of the award. We'll move to slide 10. I believe one more slide. Oh, okay. Yeah, good. Slide 10. There are several factors that would not change. Nursing programs would apply every biennium to participate in NSRP. Institutions would have discretion in how they spend the funds if the expenditures contribute to program goals. Awards must supplement current nursing program funding. They cannot replace existing funding. Awards or data submitted under the program would be subject to audit by internal and or external auditors, and institutions would be required to submit an annual report. So that concludes my presentation. Ginger will facilitate the discussion.
Great, thank you, David. So we're gonna, go back to slide 1, and we're gonna wanna start over because we wanna give you a chance to dig in and really provide your feedback. And certainly you're welcome to do that on audio. If you prefer to type in comments or questions, that's also okay. We're monitoring that as well. So in terms of what the straw man is designed to do, there are 4 priorities that the straw man is addressing. Want to make sure that we're all on board with these being the 4 priorities of the straw man. Any discussion needed for this slide? Okay, hearing none, we can move on to the second slide. Okay, so this is talking, David reviewed how this was taking 3 programs and turning them into 1 and showing you the various zip codes that would be addressed in a single program. Is there any discussion required for this slide? Okay, hearing none, we'll move to the next slide. All right, so here I think there's some new ideas that we've heard. Well, we've heard these ideas, but now we're putting them on paper to be part of the straw man. So in terms of the RN to BSN graduates and the 20% kind of rule here, what are your thoughts? What kind of feedback would you like to provide on these components?
Ginger, this is Julie.
Yes.
Julie Eklund. And it looks like we're sorry about the noise in the background here. What we were in terms of the 20%? That's a number that we'd like to hear people's feedback on that. But I think we sent some data out, and I did want to mention I was able to just this morning we got a little bit of data back in terms of looking at the RN to BSN versus the initial licensure nurses, and we do know there's some missing data there. We don't have uniform data across the board, but I was able to see that for the data we had where we could map back to RPA codes for the universities, for the GAIs, about, and I looked at it from 2016 to 2019, it looked like between 41 and 45% of the graduates reported were the RN to BSN. We didn't have any reported for the community colleges in that category, and for the ICUT independent universities, it was between 13 and 15%. The HRIs didn't have anyone reported with those RN to BSN codes, but they did have several students who we didn't have a code for them. They weren't reported as initial licensure. So just wanted people to know we're starting to take a look at that data. We understand we need to do more with it, but it would be helpful. I thought it'd be helpful to hear that, and certainly to get your feedback on this this 20% that we put out there to start for people to discuss.
This is Beth Merwin. If some of the categories were up to 41 to 45% in the past, I would wonder if 20% isn't too low. And I would wonder how not prioritizing or treating equal RN to BSN graduates will end up affecting our pipeline into nursing education and to the policy goal of achieving a higher BSN prepared workforce in Texas.
This is Marla Urban Roseman. Aren't you double dipping though? You're going to get the money for the RN for the initial licensure, and then you're going to get more money for the RN to BSN graduate. So I don't think it's equitable to the other programs.
Except for you're assuming that the programs that would have the RN to BSN also educated them in the RN, but that's not true.
No,
Right,
I'm
it's
not.
two separate programs.
Actually, I'm not assuming that. I'm just saying that it could be now with all the community colleges coming on board with the RN to BSN programs, but still the state is still paying for that one student, no matter where they go, twice then. Are you still getting money? The programs are still getting money. And some of the programs are getting millions of dollars versus which reduces the amount of money for the other programs.
I guess I'm confused at how it would be double dipping if you're cording off 20% just for this program. They're two separate reportings at that point.
No, I'm not saying, I'm agreeing with the 20%, but I was disagreeing with the other one about saying 20% was too low.
Well, I think I mean, we talk about the percentage. To me, the fundamental is the same. It's just at what level do you pick that cutoff?
Julie, is your hope today that we come to some sort of agreement on a range of percentages that should be considered, or is the idea that we want to simply come to an agreement that the 20%, that a percentage is worth including, but we don't know what it is?
Well, as a member of the work group, I would just share that my sense is that we probably need to look a little more and understand it just a little better to focus in on a percentage if people feel like this is in the right direction, to think about this as an approach to handling the initial licensure versus RN to BSN, to think about having a percentage of the total that, once that's reached, then the RN to BSN awards would be decreased to really focus on that initial licensure, but also to acknowledge what I've been hearing from the group, that there is value in the RN to BSNs as well, and certainly thinking about that pipeline to faculty. So I think if there was some general consensus, and people should certainly use the chat box, that would be helpful, and we'll give people lots of opportunity to respond. If there was a general consensus about a number to leave in our straw man, or that we should have some kind of percentage, that would be helpful. But I certainly, wouldn't expect people today to be able to say for sure that should be the number. Does that work for other people? If people are very comfortable wanting to land on something, then that's fine too. But we'll continue to delve into the data. As I said, it was very recent for me to get that, for us to find a way to at least try to get a sense of those percentages.
So let's try this. How about the first bullet, just the model of creating a percentage to for how RN to BSNs would be funded? Is everyone comfortable with the percentage model, even though you may not be comfortable with that number?
This is Cindy Zolneric. I think the attempt to identify a percentage is in response to a lot of the conversation where there was concern over the amount of the overall funding that may go to those programs. So I appreciate this proposal to try to address that. So I think the question is, to those who raised the concern, what are your thoughts about that?
is Beth Merwin. I think the idea of having some percentage is worth consideration, but I don't believe there's been enough data to inform what that percentage should be or the consequences, and I think it should be higher.
Do we have a sense of what the appropriation percentage was historically for this program? Percent of total appropriation?
This is Julie. We did run some data for you that we shared because we don't always capture these graduates. It was the best we had available, and we could certainly resend that data out to everyone. We were trying to get a sense of the graduates that were definitively initial licensure versus those where it was harder to say. So we could certainly share that out with everyone again. But yes, I believe we provided data that would help inform this question. David Young, does that sound correct? It wasn't definitive for all the categories, but it did provide some.
I think the problem with providing more detailed data is the fact that we don't have an accurate count of the RN to BSN, and we really need that level of detail before we can answer these questions.
Yeah, this is Steve. I would agree, because how do we know if 20% is correct if we don't know what the base has been historically?
Yes, and this is Julie, and what I just spoke to, it was pretty clear for the GAIs. It wasn't necessarily for other sectors, and we did have some unknown. We had talked about, would it be worth reaching out and trying to get that information from the institutions just to report back RN to BSN graduates, say for last year, so we can get some sense of what that, a better sense of what that looks like. Is that something people think is worthwhile?
Pam is on the phone. She have an idea.
This is Pam Lauer. I was going to say we collect that information from Epic, so we can certainly send you the numbers that we get from the program.
Excellent. Yes, please share that, and I think that can help us with modeling this for all of you.
Okay.
Great, thank you. So I'm not hearing any opposition to the model that we're proposing, although there seems to be consensus that the numbers, that the actual percentages need to be, need more data to inform those numbers, but that the model of this percentage seems to be agreeable to everyone. Okay. Was there anything else you wanted to talk about in terms of the data, Julie? Is there something that, aside from getting the data from Pam, was there anything else you want to discuss about the
No, I think that would be very, very helpful.
Okay.
If we did have a sense, maybe in the chat, and I can't see the chat because I'm sharing my screen, but if we were able to get a sense of maybe a range that we could look at, or if the group wanted to just, suggest that we look at some different percentages once we get that data, we could try to do a little bit of modeling to see what the percentages what things would look like. Yeah.
So far in the chat, people are giving us a thumbs up for the model, and I think perhaps the next best step is to take a look at the data that Pam is able to share and do some modeling based on that. Yeah.
That sounds good. We could run, for example, 10, 20, 30%. We can look at some different ranges and share out information.
So this is David, maybe helping us analyze the data we get from Pam. It might be helpful for us to get a sense of, probably when we get the data, the RN to BSN would be funded at a lower rate than the initial licensure. Is there a percentage of the initial licensure that you think we should kind of be looking for as a target so that we can run numbers that might, fit that scenario?
Well, David, it's Steve again. I guess I'm just curious to know, I feel like I'm shooting in the dark without the historical.
Yes, Steve, this is Julie. I understand. David, are you suggesting sort of the opposite of what we have here? Don't focus on the RN to BSN, but focus on the initial licensure. So it would be a complementary percentage to that. Is that?
So I'm suggesting we keep the same approach of some limit on the percentage of total appropriation, but perhaps backing into that once we get the data. And if we have a sense of what folks think the difference should be between the initial licensure and the RN to BSN, then that would make it easier for us to back into something like that for the initial model. And of course, that would change, from year to year. And I don't think we would propose, adjusting that, whatever that percentage is every year, but that would at least be a start.
This is Julie. I think everyone's digesting that. So basically, you'd be suggesting to say of all the pool of money that would be, in any given year available to this program, do people feel like about 80% should go to initial licensure, or about 70% should go to initial licensure? Is that sort of the direction you're taking to help us model this? What I'm thinking is, if we ran, once we get the actual data, if we run the model at the limit of 20% per total appropriation, it could be a very significant reallocation of funds, and perhaps the work group might be interested in something that's maybe not, that would have a smaller impact, and therefore just trying to come up with something that we could reach a near consensus on as far as what might be an allowable reallocation. And we would kind of back into that by, let's say, for example, if folks think that an RN to BSN should be funded at 75% of the initial licensure, then we could work a model that maybe comes close to that, and then that would give us the percent of total appropriation. Maybe it would be 25% of total appropriation, and that would be our recommendation.
This is Jan, if I could say something. I know I'm not an educator, but I was one once. The cost of running an RN to BSN program is quite different from the cost of running a basic pre-licensure program. So I don't know if you want to take that into consideration or not. Maybe educators can do that better than I could.
Does anybody want to comment on Jennifer's suggestion?
Yes, I would say the RN to BSN program has some clinical, but it doesn't have the level of supervision needed from the pre-licensure programs when you're talking about at least the maximum is a 10-to-1 ratio for faculty, and with that supervision, and there's so many clinicals. I mean, initial licensure programs are horrendously expensive to run, and typically the university ends up covering some of the overcosts for those programs that tuition does not cover. Whereas the RN to BSN program can be run very efficiently, and it is a moneymaker. I mean, that's one of the reasons that a lot of your provosts and presidents want you to add RN to BSN programs.
Julie and David, I'm curious, how much more discussion, I mean, how much closer do you want to get to a percentage, or do you just want to, is it enough that the feedback we have is that the model is good, but the percentages need investigation?
I think
Ginger,
we
I feel
can
comfortable.
move forward.
Go ahead, David.
Okay.
I was
Yeah, I
just
think
saying,
we can
I think
too.
we can move forward.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
And I
Beth.
think we have a couple different ways to approach it now, so that was actually very helpful. And I think we'll be able to look at modeling from David, what David was suggesting, but also what we've heard back from the group and talked about. So thank you.
Okay, terrific. All right, next slide. Okay, for graduate degrees and including a weight of 2, do people have any thoughts on this? Or do they agree with this proposal, or is there any discussion?
I have a question. This is Linda Yoder. I have a question. What do you mean by that lead to instructional credentials? Because there aren't that many nursing education master's programs, but for example, we have 3 education courses at UT that if the students take those, they wind up with a certificate. And that then gives them the underpinnings to get the hours that they need to sit for the NLN credential. So would something like that qualify for this?
My understanding is just those SIPs that are listed here, right? And again, this is just the straw man. So, oops, and I've got to go back to it's just the SIPs listed here, but we're happy to take feedback. Again, this is just to give us a starting point. I believe, David, correct me if I'm wrong, that these are the SIPs that are currently in use in the program, because there is additional weighting for instructional credentials.
Yes, that's correct.
Is the current weighting 2 times as much?
I believe it's 1.5.
But how many actual programs do we have in the state of Texas that give you a graduate degree in nursing education? I think there are very few.
Can you identify what the SIP codes are? The 513808 and 3203?
So here we're back to the list. 3. If you can look at these and look at your other version, I can highlight them. 3. So the nursing education. And then the other one, I'm sorry, I have to skip back to the other slide.
PhD. The other one is the nursing PhD.
808 3203.
It's a nursing science PhD.
There we go, right there. Yeah, thank you.
So your concern is that the SIP codes may not be inclusive enough of graduate education?
I think the question that was stated a minute ago maybe had to do with how would taking a 12-hour, 9-hour credit certificate, in addition to one of the other kinds of graduate programs the students enrolled in, count, or would it count? Would it be eligible?
Is that something you'd like to propose? Do you, as a hiring body, do you value a graduate certificate for hiring purposes when you're hiring faculty?
Yes.
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 Okay.
And
so that's some.
Okay. I also
That's
wanted to
something-
add,
okay.
sorry. Okay, so this is Deborah Jones. I also wanted to add that more and more we're hiring those with the DNP degree as well to teach. So I know PhD nursing education primarily historically is what you would see in academia, but you're seeing a lot more who have the Doctorate of Nursing Practice. I just think it's something we have to acknowledge, whether or not that's something we want to add. I mean, those programs grow tremendously. So I don't know if necessarily that's something we want to add, but I think we would be remiss if we didn't talk about that as a potential. Go.
Is offering these higher education certificates costly?
And this is Linda Yoder again. The DNP program, if you look at the curriculum, and most PhD programs have nothing in their curricula to prepare people to teach. So that's why at UT Austin, we have created those courses, and now we've received permission to grant a certificate in education because we want our educators to have a background in education, curriculum design, instruction, those kinds of things. So that is exactly, so it's not just for the master's students. Our PhD students can do this as well as our DNP students, because in their regular curricula, there's nothing about how to be a teacher.
And we do the same at UTMB, and we actually if someone, a brand new PhD, DNP are hired and have never taught before, we require them to take that certificate.
Okay, so it sounds like there's some consensus that we need to consider certificates for this funding model. Can we advance the slides?
Yes.
So
for the next one? For...
I think that's, you need to go back to the graduate one.
Okay, so yeah. I wasn't sure.
Yeah. So I think we just need to.
Yeah, it would be great to get feedback on that.
What about the 2.0 for degrees? Is everyone comfortable with that? Or do you want the certificates to be factored into that 2.0 somehow? So I'm kind of getting the sense that everybody agrees that weight is appropriate, but a weight for what needs to be asked a little bit more thoughtfully, and how that weight would look. Do you think the weight would look differently for degrees than it would for certificates?
I think you have to have some way to determine if their certificate is included in their program, for whether it's for the DNP or the PhD. I agree with Linda. There is no, there's nothing in a traditional PhD program in nursing that prepares you to teach. I mean, that's been one of the criticisms of PhD programs across the board, is that there's nothing that teaches you how to teach in that program. They are research degrees. So I think some way to identify if that certificate is included, or those courses. I know a big push about 10 years ago were for our PhD programs to include the educational courses in their curricula. I think there was some money that was put aside, as I said, about 10 to 12 years ago. So
maybe this isn't the place to fund the certificate programs. Maybe those certificate programs could be elsewhere, because they may or may not be associated with a graduate, right? you may have individuals that have graduated that go back to get those 9 credits and get that certificate. So what if it was funded through this in some other way, and then still fund the nursing education graduate degree through this nursing shortage reduction funding?
That sounds certainly very reasonable. Certainly, since the idea, as I recall, is to provide faculty for teaching those initial licensures and then the RN to BSN. And so it sounds like the certificates are highly valued, but perhaps don't interrupt the pipeline of faculty. I'm not sure I'm saying that in the best way possible, but meaning that you would still hire someone who may not have that certificate. So, but I'm glad this conversation came up because we haven't discussed it before. So I think perhaps the best thing to do now is to make note that we need to think about that in one way or another, either as part of this program or in some other way. But in the interest of time, I'm going to advise that we advance to the next slide. So just a moment for anyone to chime in if they would prefer to stay here for a moment longer. Okay, let's move on. All right, so quality indicators. What thoughts do you have here in terms of inclusion of pass rates and the way that we presented the idea for that inclusion here? Any discussion on this slide? Okay, I'm not seeing any comments and not hearing any feedback. Let me say one thing. When the idea of probation has come up before, I met with Ed Buchanan once, and we agreed that was when a program is unconditional approval, because then they cannot admit students. So if you need a definition from the board's viewpoint, it's conditional approval. And not being a content expert, can you tell me where that fits in on this slide?
Ginger, I'm thinking it's a recommendation for the bottom bullet to change the wording. Am I hearing that correctly?
Okay.
But I might be wrong, so.
Meaning institutions unconditional probation? Okay.
Or under conditional approval. We can certainly ask for, if you could send that feedback for wording would be very helpful, if you don't mind sharing that back with us, if it is just having to do with the terminology we've used.
Yeah, that'd be very helpful. Any other discussion before we move on? Okay, next slide. All right, the maximum award. So this is per graduate. Any discussion on this slide and what this represents for our strawman? Okay, so I'm not seeing anything in the chat and I'm not hearing any discussion. So if you have comments, feel free to share them offline if you're not comfortable sharing them here. But again, in the interest of time, we'll move to the next slide. Okay, the process for calculating using the 3-year rolling average, the funding for the biennium, and no advances and no settle-ups. Okay, so how does the maximum amount compare with the current amount? That's from the chat bar. David, would you be able to answer that question?
If Ed Buchanan is on the participating, he's probably the best person to answer that.
Okay.
It's definitely higher than we've had in the past. I don't remember the exact amounts, and they're at, but I think this was to set a ceiling, and I believe that's been more policy than what's been in the rider. Does that sound correct, David, that these are higher?
Yes, these are higher. But we're also considering the fact that with a rolling average from year to year, or using a rolling average, you may not have the same increases in number of graduates.
Correct. Yeah, it's a little different structure. So as thinking about the structure, it made sense to think about, especially if you look at the information we supplied about number of graduates, and obviously we didn't have any breakouts there for the RN to BSN component, but that the higher amount seemed to be a wise approach because those numbers are lower with the overall initial licensure than how the current program is structured. So it would ensure that for every graduate that is complete, there is a significant monetary amount potentially to be affiliated with that graduate for the school, every additional graduate.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, hearing none, let's move to the next slide. Oh, process continues. So I think usually that echo happens when you're both dialed in and the sound on your laptop or your computer is up. So if you mute your computer sound, it should end the. Do you want to go to the next slide, please?
Okay, so yeah, there's a lot on this. Let's go to the next one, and just wanted to make sure we got any comments.
Any conversation about these 2 points? Okay, hearing none, let's move on. All right, so these are the factors of the grant program that would not change based on the straw man. Does everyone feel comfortable with these elements remaining the same? Was there some change you were hoping to see here that you didn't see or that you don't see? Okay, I don't see any discussion. I'm not hearing any comments. So next slide, please. All right. Was that the last slide?
Yes, that's the last slide. I only have slides for this straw man because it was so detailed. We thought it would be helpful to go through slide by slide.
Right. Okay, well, this has been a very helpful conversation. I think we've got some ideas that we hadn't been thinking about prior to this call, so this is a really good use of our time. If there was anything you felt like you needed to comment on, but you weren't able to, or we went too quickly past, and your thought process was still on slide 3, because I know that's happened to me before. That's okay. Just please contact us offline. You can email Julie and David directly and share your thoughts. We do want to hear from you, because we want this straw man ultimately to represent the entire group. So that was the first goal of the meeting, to talk about the straw man and get your feedback. So the second part of the meeting, we're going to talk about other initiatives that could address nursing shortages. So what we'd like to do now is hear from our subgroups that volunteered to dig into this. Thank you for doing that. We'd like to hand it over to you and see. Dr. Urban Roseman and Ms. Cooper, were you able to join the call today? Was there anything you'd like to share?
This is Marla Urban Roseman. I'm on the call, and I think Tracy's on the call too.
Yes, I'm here.
What would you like to share with us today?
Other than what was submitted, I don't have anything more than what is in that document.
And the agenda. Do you want us to refer to that now and have any discussion?
Sure, you can put it up.
So are people seeing the strategy on their screen? This is Julie. I just thought I pulled it up.
No.
Not yet.
No.
You're not. Okay, that didn't work then. Let me try again. I did go in and try to do that. Okay, here we go. Share application. Let's see. Oh, no, this is not working. Let me close out of that. Sorry.
Well, could everyone please go to their the email with the agenda? Let's see, that would have been sent.
And I think I can get it if you all just go there. I'll work on it while you're doing that. So.
Okay. So I think that email was sent on last Wednesday. If you go to your email, you should see an email from Cheryl Rosapal dated June 10th. It's about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and there you see the agenda, the PDF of the agenda materials. And then I'm not quite sure which page to go to, but I think
it's page 21.
Page 21. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Okay. Could you give us all just a quick overview of the 3 points, the 3 recommendations?
Tracy, do you want me to, or do you want to?
I've got it pulled up here. I can go ahead. The 3 things that we listed were to pursue an initiative similar to the Faculty Salary Enhancement Program from South Carolina for state colleges and universities, which brings faculty salaries within the average for the geographic region of the state. And then that it could be based on AACN salary data. So that was the first. And then the second was funding for faculty pursuing a doctorate with an emphasis on education. And this could be tuition waivers at state universities for those faculty who teach in a state university school of nursing for 50% or more during the academic year. It was important, though, that we wanted it to be no unfunded mandates for universities because of budget cuts. We can't have a mandate that's not funded. And they must agree to teach for 5 years in nursing education in the state of Texas. And then the last one was increase the amount of money available for loan repayment participation and include part-time faculty, 50% or more per academic year, and they must agree to teach for 5 years. And those are the 3 suggestions that we looked at.
And Ginger, this is David. We do have a consultant who's helping us with this, Mr. Tim Henderson. We asked him to reach out to South Carolina to find out about that particular initiative. I don't know if he's able to, hopefully he's unmuted and can maybe speak to what he found. Are you available, Tim? So he did share with us his findings in an email. He said that the program was funded poorly for the first year and was not continued after that.
This is Beth Merwin. There was a program in the state of Virginia sometime in the mid-2000s where the governor took on the initiative of appropriating funds to schools of nursing and mandated that the schools would give a 10% salary increase to all registered nurses teaching in schools of nursing. That was a while back, but there may be some documentation on that program. And I would wonder if there haven't been other states that have done something to support faculty salaries.
This is Cindy Zoneric. I have a question. And I have the supply demand study in my mind about the oversupply of APRNs. And I'm wondering, is it harder to recruit faculty for the undergraduate pre-licensure positions or the graduate level positions? Because I'm wondering, should there be any targeting of faculty to teach in the pre-licensure programs based on that's where the need for graduations is most dire?
It's much harder to get faculty for APRN programs because the APRNs make so much more in out in their healthcare setting than in schools of nursing. So it is difficult to recruit them. As far as pre-licensure programs, depends on where you are. I think we have some geographic regions that have a higher shortage of individuals that apply to be faculty or that are available to be faculty. So I think that especially, what are we looking at? Are we looking at MSNs? Are we looking at PhDs? It's not a real clear cut.
So in terms of this possibly being an initiative we pursue, is that a no?
What was your question? You got some?
Yeah, I thought I got cut off. I thought somebody said no. Do we want to continue to investigate this as a possible separate initiative for improving initial licensures or nursing education?
I think it's important because as a community college, the number one thing I dread is offering someone a job because they all say yes. And then I say, well, let me tell you the salary. And then they turn me down. Yeah. So it's extremely important for us to have some way to supplement faculty salaries. That's an outside source because it's very difficult for us to get graduate faculty.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. No, that's I appreciate your feedback, and we were asked to think about not just the NSRP program, but how to address nursing shortages overall. So, okay, if there's
any other discussion, now is the time to have it, but in the interest of time, I do want to move on to the next idea.
I will just offer that TNA does intend to pursue increased funding for the nurse faculty loan repayment program. I don't know this legislative session, increasing any funding will be extremely difficult, and we may do well just to hang on to it. But that is already on our priority list.
Okay. David and Julie, was there anything else you wanted to get out of the discussion for that first set of ideas?
No, I'd just like to know, are you able to see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And this is David. Any concrete or detailed information you can provide us about how that might be implemented? Any of those programs might be implemented would certainly be helpful, like who would administer the increases, how would they be allocated, and so forth. So if y'all want to follow up with us, give that some thought and follow up with us on any of those details, that would certainly be helpful.
All right, great, thank you. So given I'm not hearing any other comments, I'm not seeing anything else in the chat. So let's move on to sub-work group number 2 about clinical faculty, preceptors, and training sites. Drs. Almasi and Hooper, if you would like to please give us an overview of what you found to jumpstart the discussion.
Yes, this is Nina. I would be happy to. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so yes, our group was related to clinical faculty, preceptors, and training sites. And these, as you know, are all current challenges for our state in regards to addressing the nursing shortage. So when we reviewed the research by Mr. Henderson on the state legislative efforts, there were 3 main themes in that category that they looked at in different states. One was funding for new clinical training programs and sites. The other was expanding grants to existing clinical training programs. And the third one was providing tax credit for preceptors. So Dr. Hooper and I discussed this, and the recommendations that we came up with are basically centered around providing some sort of a stipend or financial incentive for our preceptors as well as clinical faculty. So these are the 3 recommendations that we have. One was to provide funding for the preceptor training and stipends for preceptors engaging in the training. Dr. Hooper provided an example of a pilot project by Del Mar College. So that would be an example of how some schools could receive funding specifically to increase, maybe hire preceptors or provide additional preceptors. So that was one recommendation there. The other recommendation is to provide funding for preparation of working RN. So we actually do, and I want to hear what other schools think, but usually we do have a lot of working nurses in the facilities and the hospitals who are interested in being educators. And schools sometimes have, of course, challenges hiring qualified clinical faculty who have the training to be an educator. So this might be an avenue we could consider to provide funding for those nurses who are interested in becoming educators. And that could be done through a variety of ways. Again, a toolbox would be an example of what we could do. And then the third recommendation was the tax credit, which I understand, our state, we don't have income tax credit. I mean, we don't have income tax, but the idea is to provide some sort of a financial relief to these individuals who want to engage in precepting or teaching our nursing students. Dr. Hooper, please feel free to add anything I might have missed.
Did a great job, Nina. Is there any recommendation that folks would like to comment on?
Yeah, this is Linda Yoder. I know Texas doesn't have an income tax, as you've stated, but we have some of the highest other types of taxes that make up for that. And so, you know, you could say that this would come off property tax or one of the other taxes on someone's annual state level tax bill.
And you know what, Dr. Yoder, to be honest with you, when I read the research of the other states, that tax credit was multiple states who have actually come up with this. And I agree with you. I think if we, the idea again is to give some kind of a relief to individuals, if not through income tax. Is there any other avenue that we can explore? I definitely agree that we should look into it.
This is Beth Merwin. I was impressed in the talk that Mr. Henderson gave last time, and it's reflected in our minutes on page 3 about the different ways different states set up the tax credit. Now, I understand that we would have to have a different kind of tax credit, or you could even substitute tax credit with a pool of funds to use to be able to do something for preceptors. But it shows that it wasn't just someone get a certain credit. It really rewarded more precepting and expecting more than just occasional. So I think as we talk further about how to reward and do something for preceptors, would be another kind of tax. I think it would be wonderful. It would be really good to refer back to how the other states have structured their program.
Are there any other, does anyone have any strong opinions about the recommendations that we just heard? So a part of this discussion is we're trying to, well, ideally we've come to some consensus on whether or not we want to pursue the initiatives that are being recommended, simply because we don't have many more times that we can meet, and we think that the majority of the time at our other meetings will be used on the straw man as we develop that. So if you have any strong feelings for or against any of the initiatives being proposed, we would sure appreciate to hear from you. Okay, well, hearing no comments and seeing no comments, let's move on to, well, first, thank you, Subgroup 3. Julie Arteaga, thank you for your time, but no recommendations at this time. So subwork group 4, Educational Pathways and Partners, Drs. Tart and Umebayashi will share with us their recommendations. If you would please give us an overview.
Yes. Hi, this is Ume. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Catherine and I met virtually on May 22nd to have a conversation about this. And first of all, we want to say that Associate Degree Nursing, BSN, and RN to BSN program, those are all essential in Texas. And I know that we are doing an amazing job to increase the nursing student nurses in Texas. And when we read all of this information, we noticed that Texas is doing actually great job. So I just want to say thank you to the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board and all the nursing education programs to do such an amazing job to create seamless transition for our students. So first of all, Texas already has a cabinet articulation agreement, and I think that's an amazing agreement that we already have to create seamless transition. And however, we noticed that in a board of nursing website, it does not address the what kind of articulation agreement each program has and what kind of dual enrollment, concurrent enrollment we have. So we thought it might be a good idea to list those articulation agreements and concurrent agreements that each community college and university have. So I thought that's a good recommendation we can make. So that's number one. Number two, we also recognize that RN to BSN standalone programs are not listed in the website. And I understand that the Texas Board of Nursing does not supervise those standalone RN to BSN standalone programs. But for transparency reason, it might be a good to add those programs in the list so that students can review those at one location so students can make any decisions. And for the number three, we do know that many community colleges and universities have concurrent enrollment or articulation agreement. It might be good to have the new programs to have that agreement to support those type of seamless transition. And TCC, Tarrant County College, my college has concurrent agreement with several universities. And we noticed that we get students and we report to the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board number of students they get, but actually the BSN, those students who are in the concurrent program, those students are also in the BSN program too. So maybe we need to apply together to get the incentives for those students. Because, for example, community college accept 2 students, and those students decide to go to pursue the concurrent enrollment. Then both college and university should receive some funds for accepting those 2 students together. So I thought that might be a good consideration to have to give incentives to both college and university. For the quality indicator, we noticed that there are many colleges and some universities which do not have accreditations. So that might be a good idea to have some incentives for those colleges and universities that have accreditation. So those are our recommendations.
It sounds like someone is typing, and we're all hearing that. Again, if it's possible for you, please mind your mute. I know it can be a challenge when those of us calling in. I'm not quite sure how to mute my call-in, but please do your best. So thank you so much for sharing those recommendations. Does anyone have any comments or discussion they'd like to have based on the work group 4's recommendations? This is Jan. I hate to be talking so much, but a lot of these seem to be pointed at the BON, and I could speak to each one of those too, Dr. Ume and Dr. Tart. But one of them is the recommendation that we have a list of our in the BSN programs on our website. We don't have purview over those programs, and we don't even know all those programs because of that. Where we know that we have them in universities or in community colleges, that will be on our website and the contact information beside that school's name. So that will be there. I don't know whether to address these others or not. I'd be happy to talk to Dr. Ume if he wants to give me a call. Okay, thank you.
Sure. Sure, thank you. Thank you.
Does anyone else have anything they'd like to share about these recommendations? Okay, well, we did have a fifth subgroup, Dr. Zolniak, but at no recommendations at this time. So thank you for your time, Cindy. Appreciate that you were thinking about this. But are there any other discussions about the recommendations that our subgroup provided for us today? This is Jan again. I really like the straw man idea, and I think if you move that forward so we can see some potential numbers, that would be really helpful. I think this is getting us to a good place. Great, thank you. Thank you for that. We do have a little time left. Was there anything from the straw man you wanted to go back to now that you've had time to sit with it for a minute? Okay, so was someone going to say something?
This is Julie. I was just going to see if I can find that and put it up for everyone here. In terms of the, I believe the straw man is, here it is, yeah. Ginger, I had something that as I was listening to the conversations from the small groups that got together to talk about initiatives, and by the way, thank you very much for doing that. I know the certificates had come up earlier related to faculty, and then in that later conversation, I heard that there were some challenges in finding faculty at community colleges, perhaps finding faculty to teach initial licensure nurses. Do you think those certificates incentivize someone who might be in a program to think, hey, this is something I could consider doing? If I do this certificate, I'll have this possibility in my back pocket. And do you think they you know, beyond helping to improve the quality of instruction, do you think they really encourage nurses who might not have thought about being a faculty member to think along those lines? Because if that's the case, I can certainly see wanting to build something in to handle our faculty shortage situation.
This is Linda Yoder. I absolutely think that these make a difference. I know currently in our master's program, we've had one required education course and 2 electives that people can choose that would prepare people to sit for the NLN educator credential. And a good half of our lead students, which is like a clinical nurse leader program, take those courses. And then we also encourage our PhD students and our DNP students that come into academia to have at least one, if not all of those courses, which is why we went forward and we created this certificate program. So we have people on faculty now that when they started their programs, they didn't think they would wind up in academia. And they're part of our faculty now. So I do think this is important, which is why we went forward with creating the certificate.
Thank you. That's helpful as we think about, bringing back the straw man. I know we said we'd sort of put that in the parking lot and think about that as a separate initiative. It would be great to get feedback maybe in the chat from folks that feel like, is it worthwhile to think about that and the additional initiatives, some kind of funding for that to help with the faculty shortage, or should we be thinking about some kind of a collection of data around these nursing certificates, and it might encourage other schools to do it if it's something they're interested in doing, if it's something that really could help incent additional nurses to think about becoming faculty. So I would appreciate that feedback, and then we can kind of, think about where you would like us to involve that, and if other people feel like it's important to have in there, because I sort of see it potentially living in either place as we work on drafting a report.
And this is Jan again. You're probably ready to kick me off this committee. But, in looking at faculty across our state and across the nation, one of the weaknesses in nursing faculty is they do not have preparation in nursing education. When I completed my first master's degree years ago, I had an opportunity to do the certificate program, and I did it because it was funded, but that was one of the best things I ever did in my education. And the CNE certificate that someone spoke about a moment ago from NLN, that's another way to go about it, because you have to really prepare to take that exam. Some of us at the board have done it just to validate that we have the education knowledge. And it is, it's not an easy exam, and there's a lot of preparation you have to do. But the certificate programs do prepare people to take that exam. And I think if you wanted to do one thing that would improve nursing education in our state, it would be that nurse educators get more education in the field.
This is Ume.
Thank you.
Oh, this is Ume. I'm not sure this is a good idea or not, but is there any way like we can report to the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board whenever we hire new faculty where they graduated from? For example, if sometimes we hire nurse practitioners as an undergraduate instructor, and if they are graduate from, for example, University of Texas, Arlington, then maybe, UTA can get some incentive for creating the workforce as an educator. Is it something that we can do like that?
This is Julie. I can just respond in terms of the data collection parts of it. So the idea would be, and just to think about if we had to put an idea down on paper, that for these, we're seeing SIPs in front of us, we would maybe stick to the 2 SIPs that are here in terms of what we've got in the straw man for double the award, but there would be something built in that if someone, for example, got a DNP, but then they could be directly tied to being in a faculty position, then an additional award would go back to the institution for that degree. I think it could be very, very complicated, I'm afraid, to administer unless you did it in a very immediate way. If that graduate immediately went in and was in a teaching role, then we could, go back and consider that someone who was prepared to be a teacher. But I feel like if it was 10 years later, that would be a very challenging, I would think, to administer. But I'll let other folks weigh in who work on the administration part of this.
Thank you.
But a really interesting idea if it's something that we could flesh out a way to do it.
Well, if we could tie the some kind of nursing education loan repayment program to this idea, that would make it a way that would be attractive, and people in all the different types of nursing who take at least a certificate worth of nursing education courses, and then go into, you could put a limit of it. I don't know if you would want to say a state or within the state of Texas, nursing education program would, to teach, would be qualified for so much loan payment. That would give some documentation. It would be really incentivizing for students to make the decision to go right out of their program into faculty roles.
This is Linda Yoder again. I think for our own graduates from the DNP, PhD, and master's programs, I think if you say that if they completed the certificate within 2 years of graduation, because we know who our graduates are, and so we have them already in our database, and then we can see if they go through the certificate program. And then anybody else that signs up for it, we can validate their graduation from wherever they went based on their transcript. And so I think if they complete the program within 2 years of graduation, the certificate, I don't think that would be that hard to track, and it would be tied actually to their goals for graduation. They may have already graduated, but their goal is to be an educator, and this then is that additional checking the box to meet that goal.
Thank you. I think we could try to write up some of these ideas and just share it out to get feedback from everyone. But I think I've tried to take some good notes in terms of all these ideas around the certificate programs and finding ways to go sort of beyond just the couple of SIPs that we're incentivizing here in terms of the nursing educators. So we'll share something back. Any other comments on that or feedback or suggestions? Thank you.
Hi, Myra. This is Laurie Iserlow here. I'm a candidate running for Travis County Attorney to replace David Escamilla, who's retiring. I noticed that you had supported David in years past, and David's endorsed me, so I'm hoping that I could maybe earn your support as well. I'm at 512-294-8095. My name.
Have we lost everyone? Hello? Ginger, are you there?
I just got back in, sorry.
Yeah, thank you. I think Victor was managing the meeting there.
Okay.
We're still.
Was there any other discussion on anything else in the straw man? We have about 15 minutes left.
I'm going to pull up the process here just so we have this, because one thing we did talk about is whether one idea that had come up in an earlier meeting was funding for both years to be distributed in the first year. It would be just helpful to get confirmation. I think that came out of one of the small work groups that back when we were able to meet in person in February got together. Do folks still believe that would be helpful, or it would be nice to get some overall feedback on that? I know we had some notes about it. So feel free to put something in the chat if you have any comments on that. I think at the time we said we'd have to go back and look at something like that were possible administratively, and we believe that it could be.
I don't know what happened. I don't know how we got that call in the middle of a call.
Okay, have we got everyone back on with us again? I just think it was someone listening into the open meeting, someone who called in from the information we posted. So have we got everyone else back? Oh, here we go. Challenge to implement. I think we did get some chat. Thank you. I unfortunately can't see the chat box while I'm posting the materials.
So Linda Lane. Yes, Linda Lane posted that was only for the over and under 70 programs. It looks like we are recommending one program based on graduation growth.
Right.
And then Nancy Stern posted challenging to implement every other year since the university expects funds to be expended in 1 year.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Yeah, that would be helpful on that idea. If we could get other folks to comment on whether administratively that would be helpful or challenging for your institutions. You know, some folks getting off up front would mean you could plan better, but for some, it sounds like administratively that would be harder for you.
Yeah, it's very hard to hear because of the noise. If anybody is able to check their mute again, please do. Mute the speaker on your phone. I mean, if you're able to mute the speaker on the phone, please do that. And the speaker or microphone on your computer. I'm not seeing any other chats regarding your question, Julie, in terms of implementing and whether or not that works administratively for your institutions.
Well, thank you. I did just want to point it out so people take note of it and know that, again, this is a straw man. We're putting ideas out there based on your feedback, but there were some where, you know, we wanted to make sure we got full feedback from the group. I'm going to go back to our agenda for you, Ginger, if that's helpful.
Yeah. So we have about 10 minutes left. Hopefully everyone is still able to hear and contribute. But really the last thing on our agenda is to think about our last meeting, which is already scheduled for July 25th. Hopefully that's on all of your calendars. I think we may have sent a hold for you. So, you know, at that meeting, it is supposed to be our final meeting because we have to prepare reports for internal review before we can send them to the legislature by the deadline of this advisory group. So any closing thoughts about the final meeting?
Ginger, I believe it's July 28th, Tuesday, July 28th. I might have misheard you. I just want to make sure everyone has the date correct.
Oh, okay, the 28th. Yeah, I have it wrong in my notes then. Sorry about that.
Okay.
All right. Well, you know, once again, thank you for your time. You will be hearing from us soon as we take all of your comments to heart and integrate that into what we shared today as a straw man. So that we'll probably try to get some feedback from you through email before our final meeting. So you might anticipate quite a bit of traffic from us in the next month as we prepare for that last meeting. And we again very much appreciate your time. And assuming there's no other comments regarding the content we've shared today, you'll be hearing from us soon, and have a great afternoon. Happy Monday.
Thank you.
Thanks for all your work.
Everyone. Thank you for all your participation. It's appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.